Early in my career, something happened that I never forgot. I watched someone with less experience, less technical knowledge, and a shorter track record get promoted into a role I genuinely believed should have been mine. At the time, I was angry. I thought it was unfair. I told myself the decision makers had got it wrong. It took me years to understand that they hadn't. And what I eventually figured out changed the entire way I managed my career from that point forward. I was a number of years into my career in financial services at this point. I'd worked hard. I knew my area inside out. I was reliable, technically strong, and genuinely committed to the organisation. When the opportunity came up, I felt ready, more than ready. I assumed the people above me could see that. I didn't say much, I didn't push for it, I believed my track record would make the case for me. And then someone else got it. Someone I had more experience than. Someone I had trained in certain areas. Someone who on paper I felt was clearly less qualified for the role. I remember the feeling clearly. It was a mixture of shock, frustration, and if I'm honest, a deep knock to my confidence. What did they see in him that they didn't see in me? For a while, I told myself the usual stories. It was politics, it was favouritism, the decision makers simply had it wrong. And maybe there was a small element of truth in some of that. Organisations aren't perfect. Decisions aren't always made purely on merit. But here's what I have learned from sitting on both sides of those decisions over a long career. When a capable person gets passed over for someone less experienced, politics is rarely the whole story. Usually something more specific is going on, and in my case, when I finally got honest with myself about it, the real reason became clear. The person who got promoted was better known to the people who made the decision. He had more visibility. He had spent time, deliberately or not, in conversations and situations where senior leaders got to see how he thought and how he operated. I'd spent that same time at my desk doing excellent work that very few people above my immediate manager ever directly saw. I was invisible to the people who mattered. And invisible people don't get promoted. The clarity didn't come immediately, it came gradually over time. As I progressed further in my career and eventually found myself on the other side of those decisions, when I was involved in discussions about who to promote, I started to notice the pattern from the inside. Names came up, people shared their impressions, and the professionals who moved forward were almost always the ones that multiple people in the room had direct experience of. The ones they could speak to confidently. The ones where someone could say, I know how that person operates under pressure. I've seen their judgment. I'm confident. The professionals who didn't move forward were often ones where the room went quiet, where people said, I'm sure they're good, but I don't know them well enough to say. Now that silence was the gap. Not a gap in capability, a gap in visibility. And I started to think back to my own experience of being passed over. I realised exactly what had happened. The room hadn't gone quiet because of anything wrong with me. They'd gone quiet because they simply didn't know me well enough to speak up. Now that was a hard thing to sit with, but it was also enormously clarifying. Once I understood the real reason, I started looking more carefully at what the person who had been promoted ahead of me had actually done differently, and it wasn't what I expected. He hadn't worked harder than me. He hadn't delivered dramatically better results. He wasn't more talented in any obvious technical sense, but he had done something I hadn't. He had consistently put himself in situations where senior people could see him think. He contributed in cross-functional meetings where I never showed up. He asked thoughtful questions when senior leaders presented to the team. He volunteered for projects that took him out of his immediate area and into contact with people further up the organisation. Now, none of it felt calculated at the time. It may not have been deliberate on his part, but the effect was the same. By the time that promotion decision was made, multiple senior people had direct experience of him. They had seen his judgment, they had heard his thinking, they had formed a picture of him that went beyond his job title and his immediate outputs. They hadn't formed that picture of me because I had never given them the opportunity to. From that point on, I made a deliberate decision to change how I approached my career. I stopped assuming that the good work would eventually be discovered. I started taking responsibility for making sure the right people understood what I was capable of. Not by talking about myself, or not by making my ambitions obvious in a way that felt uncomfortable or political, but by being more intentional about where I spent my time and energy, by contributing more visibly in the right situations, by building relationships with people beyond my immediate team, by making sure that when my name came up in a room where there were people in it who could speak to who I was and what I brought. It wasn't an overnight change, and it didn't feel entirely natural at first. I spent years operating with my head down, and shifting to a more visible approach took genuine effort. But the results were different, noticeably different. The opportunities started to come, the conversations changed. My name started to come up in rooms I wasn't in, and people started to advocate for me in ways that hadn't happened before. Not because I'd suddenly become more capable, because the right people finally had a clear enough picture of the capability I'd always had. Now, over the rest of my career, I watched this pattern repeat itself again and again. Talented professionals passed over not because they weren't good enough, but because they were operating under the same assumption I had carried early on. That excellence alone would be recognised and rewarded. Now, sometimes it is, but you cannot build a career strategy on sometimes. The professionals I watched advance consistently were the ones who understood consciously or instinctively that their careers was something they needed to manage actively, that perception mattered, that relationships mattered, that being known and trusted by the right people was not a nice addition to good performance, it was an essential part of it. And the ones who struggled with almost always the ones who kept doing what I had done early on, keeping their heads down, trusting the work to speak for itself, waiting, some of them waiting very long time, and some of them are still waiting. Now, I'm sharing this story because I know how it feels to be passed over for something you believe you deserved. And I know how easy it is to draw the wrong conclusion from that experience. If you've been passed over recently, or if you can feel it happening right now, I want you to ask yourself one honest question. Do the people who make decisions about my future actually know me well enough to advocate for me confidently? Not know of me, know me. If the answer is no, or even maybe, that's not a reflection of your capability. It's a gap in your visibility. And a gap in your visibility is something you can close. Start paying attention to where the senior people in your organisation are. What meetings do they attend? What projects are they focused on? Where are the natural opportunities for you to contribute in ways they'll directly experience? Start showing up in those spaces, not to be seen for the sake of it, but to give the people above you the chance to build a real picture of who you are and what you bring. And start doing it now. Not when the next opportunity comes up, because by the time the opportunity arrives, it's already too late to build that foundation. The professionals who get promoted aren't the ones who start preparing when a role becomes available. They're the ones who have been building that visibility, their reputation and their relationships long before anyone announces that a position is open. I was passed over early in my career. Now it stung, and for a while I drew completely the wrong lesson from it. But eventually I understood what had actually happened, and that understanding shaped everything that came after. The person who got promoted wasn't better than me. They were just more visible to the people who mattered. Now, once I understood that, I stopped leaving my career to chance. I'm not sharing this to be self-congratulatory. I'm sharing it because I wasted time carrying the wrong belief. And I don't want you to do the same. Your capability is real. Your contribution matters. But if the right people can't see it clearly enough to speak up for you with confidence, none of that is enough on its own. Take control of that today. Now, if this story resonated with you, I'd really like to hear yours. So leave a comment below and tell me about the time you felt overlooked, despite doing everything right. What happened? And what did you take from it? And if you're finding value in these videos, please like and subscribe, because every week I bring you the honest, practical perspective on career growth that most people only wish they'd had earlier. Your career is too important to leave in other people's hands. It's time to take it back.